What needs to be on that resume? What are the exact qualifications that the next Atlanta Braves manager needs to get this team back to the World Series? We'll discuss that on today's episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastroianni. You can follow me on social media at ShortstopBall. Check out the podcast there at LockedOn_Braves on X and Locked On Braves on Instagram. If you're new and you're watching this on YouTube, please do me a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button. Last I looked, we were about 15 subscribers away from 15,000 if I'm good at math, and I'm not, but I think that was about the correct number that we needed to get there. So thank you so much for your support there. And you can help others find us. Just hit that thumbs up button and leave me a comment down below. Great numbers on the last podcast, obviously, with the Brian Snicker news. Thank you so much for that. On the audio side, you can help out too. Just leave a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks so much for continuing to make Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. If you're new, joining us here for the manager hunt, thank you for joining us here at Locked On Braves. And again, if you would, hit that subscribe button, hit the thumbs up button, all those good things. On today's episode, I'm going to give you my 5 qualifications, what I think this next manager has to have for the Atlanta Braves to get them back into World Series contention. Also get some of your comments. This is going to be more of a dialogue episode. I'm going to get some of your comments from social media and from those who are there or who are here with me live as I'm recording. And then we'll also get into the postseason update and give you some newer names. CJ Nikowski, he put out a list of some managerial candidates that could be available for hire, some that I hadn't really thought about. So we'll go through the list of those names too on today's episode. But I want to start out talking about what are the qualifications. The managers coming in there, they're putting in their resume. What needs to be on that resume? What do you need to see in the next manager to deem them qualified to take over this role for the Atlanta Braves? This is a very important hire for the Braves. Again, they are still in a window where they should be competitive. I think, at least. I know some fans maybe don't feel that way. I still think that this team is in a window where they need to be competitive and should be competitive. And so it's important for me that you bring in the right manager to get this team going in the right direction. That's why you made this move. And I'm not going to get into the details of it because I haven't read the entire article myself yet, but apparently Mark Bowman, MLB.com, and his article about Snicker, it made it sound like the decision was made for him as far as even spring training about whether or not he was coming back next year. So you can go read that if you want to. I said yesterday, I feel like he was talked out of it. Is basically the nice way to put it. And I think that was the right move because you need some new life. You need some new energy to try to get that spark going again with this core. And so again, bring it all back. I think that's why this managerial search is so important and you got to get the right guy. So I'm going to give you my top 5 qualifications and I'm going to list them in order of necessity of what I think the manager has to have. Number 1 for me is, and if you've been listening, you listened to yesterday's episode, you listened when we talked about this during the season. I think the number 1 quality is they need an experienced manager. Somebody who has obviously managed at the big league level before, preferably somebody who's managed in the postseason before, preferably somebody that's had some experience in the postseason before. That's what I want out of this next managerial hire. As I said a minute ago, this is still a team that is in the middle of a competitive window. They need somebody that can come in right away and put that into gear and has that experience of being on a winning team, of managing a winning ball club, of managing an experienced ball club. I mean, a lot of these guys have been there and done that. Yes, some of them are still kind of young, but this is a very experienced group of players. They're going to want to hear, I believe, from an experienced manager who has been there and done that. I think, if this were a young group, they haven't done much yet. I think it would be okay. Maybe they would get a first-time manager or even a younger-ish type manager. And I'm not saying this has to be an old manager that the Braves go get, but somebody that's been there and done that, and they have the resume to back it up. And so for me, that's the number one thing in this job for me, is getting somebody that has experience. That's why I pretty much dismiss, the Mark DeRosa hires, unless you want to count the Team USA baseball, whatever, World Baseball Classic, experience, which is some experience, but that's not what I'm looking for. I want Major League Baseball managing experience. That's what I am looking for. So that's the number one thing for me, is it's got to be somebody with Major League Baseball managerial experience. And again, preferably a good amount of it, and preferably somebody that has won in the postseason before. Number two for me, I need a manager that's going to be adaptable. One of the shortcomings, I believe, of Brian Snitker that I've talked about in the past is that he is very much a player's manager, which is good. You want pretty much any manager to be a good player's manager, and I think he was that. I don't think Brian Snitker was adaptable, though, to the circumstances, to the situation. Whether that was, and what I've always thought, just again from a 1,000-foot view here, is that when things are going right and you're winning, he was fantastic of keeping everybody even keel, not getting too high with the success. He did a great job of that, of just managing where you were, managing when things are going well. What it didn't seem like for Brian Snitker, at least these past couple of years, is when the wheels are starting to fall off a bit, okay, we got to shake things up. Not to really harp on this too much, but that's part of why it made me so frustrated that he moved Ronald Acuna Jr. down to 7th, because he had never really shown any urgency to shake up the lineup. But Ronald has a bad week or two, and suddenly he's batting 7th in the order. But that was part of the reason I was so mad at that, is because it was so hypocritical to the way that he had managed in the past, where he had been so slow to change up. Ozzy's has his hot and cold streaks, but he rides them too long in the hot streak up at the top of the order and doesn't recognize, okay, he's cooled off, let's move him down. Riley has a bad month. Olsen gets off to a bad start. We're going to continue to bat him 2nd or 3rd. Now, to his credit, earlier this year, nobody was really hitting well. That you really couldn't move guys around at all. But being adaptable to the situation and how guys are hitting, how guys are playing, also just it's hard to know exactly how much actual managerial strategy goes into the game today, but being able to adjust and adapt to the style of baseball that you need to play. They were talking about it on the Cubs broadcast the other day, in the Cubs Padres games, how, Craig Counsell talked about managing and adjusting their offensive strategy when at home, and how when the wind's blowing in, the ballpark factors, they know they're not going to get a lot of home runs. They need to be more aggressive on the base pass and do the small things. I just don't feel like that's ever really been there for the Braves manager, for Brian Snitker. I feel like it's just been, we're going to do things this way, and either this works or we're out of luck. I want a manager that can be a little bit more adaptable and goes and can go with where the Braves are at that moment. And I feel like just for Brian Snitker, we have seen a lack of that, or at least it's been very slow to change that in the past. So that's number 2 for me. Number 1, experience. Number 2, adaptable. And number 3, really the qualification that any manager should have is a leader. And you all know it. You work a regular job. People who are in there that are leaders. I am not one of those. I am one at my job where just tell me what I need to do and I'm going to get it done. I am not a leader. I am a follower. I am just tell me. I'm a task-oriented person. Just tell me what I need to do. But and I know at my job, I know who those leaders are. I know those people who like to take charge. And I think that's what you need here. You need a leader. As I said earlier, you need someone the players will respect. This is an experienced veteran group now. They need somebody in that clubhouse that they are going to respect, somebody that is a proven leader that has that type of ability. And that's exactly what this next Braves manager needs to have. Number 4 for me, somebody that is analytically minded, but with an old school approach. And here's what I mean by that. Somebody that's going to take a look at the data going into the game, take a look at the splits, the matchups, and all of that, and put that into their decision-making for putting out the best lineup to put the players in the best spot to win that night. But during the game, managing what is in front of you It's great to have the game plan going in, and sometimes you need to stick to that. But I want a manager that during the game, they can go with their gut. They can go with their instinct if they feel like something is unraveling, unfolding during the game that changes what is on that data sheet. And that's what I need. I do think they do need to be a little bit more analytically minded. Batting Eli White strictly against lefties when he's been better against righties, that doesn't make any sense. Using Dylan Dodd against lefties when he's better against righties doesn't make any sense. Use platoons the right way based on the data you have. Put the best lineups together to start the game, but during the game, as the action unfolds, being able to have a feel for the game. Not pulling Blake Snell after 5 innings when he has looked absolutely dominant and he gives up one lazy hit. Going with what you see. Shout out to Kevin Cash. Somebody mentioned Kevin Cash, and I said, no way, just because of that one dumb decision that he made in the World Series. But that's what it means for me, because I see a lot of people saying we need somebody that's more analytically minded. Okay, that's fine. And yes, I agree. But I also want somebody with that old school approach that can manage off of their gut instincts with how the game is unfolding. It's great to see it all on paper before a game starts, but once the game starts, all bets are off at that point, and you got to be able to make decisions based on the moment as well and how the game is unfolding. And then the last one for me is a good amount of energy. Someone that's not afraid to get on a player if needed. And this is not a shot at Brian Snitker. We do not necessarily know what all happens behind closed doors, but I do need somebody that will get on, Acuna's the easier one to pick on, but get on Acuna. We just saw watching the Red Sox-Yankees game. We just saw Giancarlo Stanton look towards his dugout and celebrate for a ball he thought he was gone, and he almost got thrown out at second. You need a manager that's going to sit you on the bench. What he should have done with Kelenic, what he did do with Acuna, he should have done the same thing with Kelenic. I need somebody that will stick to that and is not afraid to stand up to the player. I need somebody, and this one is more for the fans. I've talked about this in the past. I don't think this has as much impact on the game as fans think it does, but it would be nice to have a manager that gets on the umpire a little bit more, maybe gets thrown out a little bit more, with the intention of trying to spark up your team. And again, there's no data to really prove that has any measure of effect, but I think that's more for the fans. We would like to see that. We would like to see our manager get fired up when things are going poorly, something's not going your way. It would be nice to see. Again, nothing really to prove that actually has any effect on the team. But I think from a fan perspective, it'd be nice to see a little bit more energy in the dugout, to see, we all grew up watching Bobby Cox get thrown out all the time, and that was fun to see. So I would like to see a little bit more of that. So that's my top 5 qualifications for this next manager. Somebody that has experience, preferably experience in the postseason, somebody that can be adaptable, changing to the situation, somebody that is a proven leader, or is that a natural leader, somebody that's analytically minded, but with an old school approach to be capable of going off their gut during a game, and somebody with a good amount of energy to try to spark the team, spark the crowd, spark the fans. Would like to see that as well. Next, I'll get into what you said are some of your qualifications. A lot of you had the same ones that I did. We'll also get into some other candidates that were brought up in the list that CJ Nikowski put out. We'll get into all that here next. The NFL season is here, and so is the MLB postseason, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff and first pitch with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel allows you to bet the way you like with player props, building same-game parlays, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes every game a little bit more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on the postseason, where you got teams advancing today. You're going to get the Brewers and the Cubs in the next round. Be interesting to go check out FanDuel.com to see what the odds are on that matchup. And also, we'll see what happens with the Guardians and the Mariners, too. And we're waiting on the finale and the conclusion of the Yankees and the Red Sox, but you also got the Phillies and the Dodgers, and what might be, I think, the 2 best teams in baseball squaring off. So that's going to be a really fun series. You can go to FanDuel.com to check out those odds over there. In fact, I'm looking at them right now, and they have the Dodgers as a slight favorite over the Phillies, and they have the Brewers as a slight favorite over the Cubs. I think those are going to be 2 very close matchups in the National League. Very fun to watch. But again, you can check out those odds over at FanDuel.com. Also, make sure you visit FanDuel.com/playsafe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way you play. Are you ready? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Thank you as always, making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. Go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen of the day. They'll be talking about all this wild action happening in the postseason and why the ABS needs to be implemented now. That Cubs-Padres game could have unfolded so much differently in that ninth inning, but alas, it is not here yet. I'm sure they'll be talking about that on Locked On MLB. All right, next, I asked you, what are some must-have qualities that the next Braves manager has to have? Get to some of those comments. Some of them are mean towards Brian Snitker, but Tyler Gardner says having a presence, being a leader who can manage egos, also someone who can use analytics but isn't scared with the gut feeling at times, or bullpen management. I think those are all good too. I didn't mention that. I think as fans, we're just always going to be upset with bullpen management, but it did feel like that was a weakness of Brian Snitker's at time, and it's tough over 162 to manage a bullpen, try to keep guys fresh, know when to use them, know when to save them. But I agree with, those other ones as well. Being a leader that can manage egos. These are guys that have been there, done that. They're experienced. You're going to need to be able to handle that. And Tyler agreed exactly with what I said. Somebody who's analytical, but also not scared to go with that gut. Eddie Zipper says, somebody that gets booted from the games on the reg. There's a couple of these comments too, but I know a lot of fans would like to see that. Chick says, for many Rays fans, X accounts, the next manager better get ejected 25 times next year. Argue every missed call, hit batter. The next manager has to stick up for the players, I hear. And that's kind of tongue in cheek there from Chick. But again, I think it is more for the fans, but it is nice to see your manager, stick up for your players, get thrown out every once in a while, show a pulse. Josh A. Daniels says, somebody to stand up for your players more, show more fire. Don't be afraid to get mad at your own talent as long as the message gets sent and received. So that's 3 of the comments already that have been about a manager showing more fire. Jason Watson says, David Ross, he knows the Braves way, but yet has outside influences to add to the Braves way. I've said this on previous podcasts. I do think it needs to be external. I know Walt Weiss is going to get a good interview. Eddie Perez probably will too. Maybe Freddie Gonzalez, but I do think this next hire needs to be external. If you can get somebody external, but also is familiar with the internal, like a David Ross, I think that would be ideal. But I do think it needs to be somebody not currently in the organization. Dave Vesey says, fire, energy, enthusiasm. Again, this is 4 out of the first 6 comments I've read. They all want more fire and energy. Double A says it needs to be someone who is a player's manager, someone who won't divide the locker room, but put their foot down when they need to. And we talked about that as well. I do think that's very key with this group that you already have. That's, some of them won a World Series, many of them been to postseason, many of them have won a lot of awards. You need to have somebody that can manage those egos, but somebody that they're going to respect, but also somebody that's not afraid to put their foot down on a guy that's won an MVP, somebody that's won a Silver Slugger, all of these things, been to all-star games. Like Braves have so many players that have, not be afraid to put their foot down and say what needs to be said to those players. MLB in a healthy spot says, I just don't want the new manager to act completely disinterested if the team is in the midst of the most disappointing season in franchise history. Little shot at Snit there. Ed Bob says, not necessarily from the manager, but we have to steal more bases and get stolen on less. And I've talked about that a lot during the season. That's got to be a focus of this team going forward, is overall just being better at the little things. But it is very frustrating that the game has changed and it feels like the Braves haven't adapted to it yet. But everybody else is taking advantage of it against them. JDO3 says, normal, not analytical lineup, aggressive attacking offense, get after it with umpires, never take a starting pitcher out at 4 2/3 innings and play your best players, old or young. Justin says, personally, my preference is someone who isn't afraid to get in the face of a player. Calvin says, tactical, relatable to all groups in the clubhouse, doesn't bat his best hitter, 7th. Another, some more shade thrown to Brian Snitker there. Brooks White says some type of grit and toughness instead of happy-go-lucky Pappy. So another shot at Brian Snitker. Rick Gaines, energy. I am really surprised. Maybe I shouldn't be, of how many of these comments are about somebody that shows more energy and fire. Again, as I said, that was number 5 on my list, but I think that's more for us as the fans than it is for actual results on the field. But it would be nice to see. Ashley Hutchinson says, argue for your players like Bobby did. Ted Bracewell says, first name Chipper, last name Jones. Jeremy Vincent says, bullpen management, lineup messaging when needed. Maybe that's massaging. Sorry. Hold all players accountable the same. Bench a player when needed. Calm yet stern and fair. I agree with all those. And we've touched on some of them. Matt H says, need somebody with some swag. I think that's what the kids still say these days, Matt. But yeah, I don't know who that would be. Dustin Mount's prior experience, or I'll tell you, I know who it would be, but I do not want them as our manager, and it is Gabe Kapler. That might be the one manager out there that might have a little bit of swag, but I don't want any. Somebody mentioned Gabe Kapler, and I immediately said no in all caps. No, thank you there. Dustin Mount's prior experience in a mix of analytics and gut feeling driving decisions. We definitely agree on that. Hayden Harris says, can't put the most talented player in franchise history in the 7th spot in the order. I definitely agree with you there, Hayden. Chris 1414 says, in-game tactician. Yeah, I mean, certainly I don't mean to ponder that like it's not something that I want. But trying to be, I guess, a little bit more specific in that and when to pinch hit, when to pinch run, when to make that change in the bullpen. Those are all things we're going to second guess no matter what. And I don't think Snitker was awful at that. Maybe more so in the bullpen. And certainly earlier this year, there were some head scratchers, but overall, I don't think he was awful at that. But yeah, you want somebody that can definitely manage well in game. Not BD Cooper says, not have Candy Crush downloaded on their phone. Snitker became a master at that game while games are going on this year. Man, a lot of hate for Brian Snitker here tonight. Booth says, the guy we want is kind sage, and one will work for minimum wage. I think they'll have plenty of money to spend on whatever manager they want. I think they'll have the pick. And then last one from Clark Kent, again, and to finish what has been pretty much on point for all these responses, someone has to have some fire. So a lot of these, and I think that's probably, you see Clinton, Darnell, and Tanya in the comments saying that Snitker is old. I think we've all just kind of got that feeling from Brian Snitker, just because I don't know whether it's his age or not. Got to be careful. My dad's around that age too, but there just wasn't a lot of fire. There wasn't a lot of energy from Brian Snitker these last couple of years. And again, I don't know how much that would have changed things. I think that's just more because that's all we can see, right? From the outside, from sitting on our couch, sitting in the stands. That's all we really can see and go off of. And when they pan to Brian Snitker and he's picking his nose or getting something out of his teeth or yawning even, it's not a good look for us as fans. But I don't know, if they've showed him in those moments and he's yelling at the umpire, barking at the umpire, or stomping his feet or doing whatever Cranny does over there. Cranny's got plenty of energy. He's always got an upset look on his face. Would that have changed things? I don't know. But I think there's so many comments on that because that's what we can visually see. I talked about this with Ronald too. When Ronald's going through his slump, everybody's talking about, the guy doesn't run, he's lazy, all that. I said, it's just his body language. You see it on his body that, he's sullen. He knows he's not playing well. He wants to be doing better, but he's not. And he just wears his emotions on him. And the emotions of Brian Snitker for the past couple of years has been, he's tired. And maybe that's just the case. All right, next we'll get into some of the comments here from the live chat section. We'll also get to some other managerial candidates that I think could make some sense and maybe fit some of those qualifications we talked about. We'll do that here next. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, being right means cashing in. With football back, the MLB postseason in full swing, PrizePicks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes, all in less than 60 seconds. It's very simple. The day of the games, all you got to do is open up the PrizePicks app. You'll see plenty of Shohei Ohtani on there. Just pick more or less on the number of home runs he's going to hit in that game. It's all you got to do. Or Bryce Harper or Christopher Sanchez strikeouts, whatever the case may be, they'll have a number for you. Just pick more or less. It's all you got to do. Also, if you're having issues controlling the way you game, visit prizepicks.com/help-center/responsible-gaming for tips on how to practice responsible gaming. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. There's nothing like catching a baseball game live. The energy, the crowd, the chance to see your team in person, but actually getting tickets, that's the tough part. Queues, login screens, surprise fees, it takes all the fun out of it. That's why I use Gametime, the app that gives you the advantage back. Gametime is fast, easy, and backed by the Gametime guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included. So the price you see is the price you pay. Maybe you live near where a postseason game is going to be happening this month. Check out Gametime. Maybe you can get a last minute good deal. I've taken my nephew to a college football game this weekend. I got some really good seats and a good deal with the Gametime app. It's all I use now whenever I'm going to a game. I love you can see the price up front, no surprise fees, and you get a view from your seat right there in the app. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Gametime today. Well, on Thursday, that is today, sorry about that, CJ Nikowski put out a tweet with a list of managerial candidates, and I wanted to look at some of those real quickly because there's some on there that I hadn't talked about. I didn't mention in yesterday's episode that I think make some sense for the Atlanta Braves. And the first one on that list is Brandon Hyde. He spent 7 years with the Orioles, was let go earlier this year. 0-5 in the postseason, not great, but certainly some, not some, but a good bit of experience, some postseason experience. That Orioles front office is not great and certainly didn't do him any favors, but it wasn't good either. I mean, he had a good team. I picked him to win the AL East this year, and that didn't happen. So certainly not somebody that's necessarily high on my list, but is an interesting candidate. Rocco Baldelli, we did talk about him a little bit yesterday. He spent 7 years with the Twins, 3-8 in the postseason. Part of that was just, unfortunately, they kept playing in Yankee Stadium, and they just can't win in Yankee Stadium. But did eventually get some wins there and got 3 postseason wins. A little bit younger of a manager, but obviously plenty of experience now. I don't hate the Rocco Baldelli idea if that's the way the Braves wanted to go. Twins, front office also didn't do him a ton of favors, but that was a decent group in a very winnable division. I think he could have done a little bit more there. But again, I don't hate the Rocco Baldelli idea. Bob Melvin, 22 years with the Mariners, Diamondbacks, A's, Padres, Giants, been on the West Coast, 16-23. So plenty of postseason experience. Not really my favorite candidate of this list, but certainly somebody that has plenty of experience, which is the number one thing on my qualifications. Phil Nevin, 2 years with the Angels, no postseason experience, was not really good with the Angels, so I wouldn't really consider him, but does have some experience at least. Joe Girardi. Girardi was somebody that I really liked when he was with the Yankees. I thought he got a bad rap there. But 14 years as a big league manager, 10 with the Yankees, 3 with the Phillies. So you get him in division, chance for him to stick it to his former team. 28-24 in the postseason. The only one on this list that's going to have a winning record in the postseason. 1 World Series title as well. The only one you're going to see on this list with second person on this list with a World Series title, which he won back in 2009. I wouldn't hate the Joe Girardi idea. The other one is Joe Madden, who obviously has a World Series as well. 19 years of experience, 9 with the Rays, 5 with the Cubs, 5 with the Angels, 32-35 in the postseason. So a losing record in the postseason, but plenty of experience there. And like I said, has reached a World Series and won a World Series with the Cubs. So Joe Madden, if you want to bring him back out, could be a good hire for the Braves. And then the other one here is John Gibbons, 2 separate stints with the Blue Jays. So AA very familiar with him, 10-10 in the postseason. So a lot of experience. So there are some other names for you. I think of this list, Rocco, I'd probably rank it Girardi, Rocco, and Joe Madden. I don't know why I've just never really loved the Joe Madden, but obviously is a pretty good manager. But those are the 3 on this list that really stick out to me that I think would be good hires for the Atlanta Braves. Now getting to some of your live comments too. Here, heard several people talk about Travis d'Arnaud getting a shot. They're not going to take somebody that just finished playing and make them a coach. Down the road, I think d'Arnaud could be a great fit as a manager. And certainly if he does hang it up, I would like for the Braves to see him, get in the organization somehow. Chris Hester says Girardi could work. I agree. I liked Girardi, like I said, especially when he was with the Yankees. He did maybe underachieve a little bit with the Phillies, especially what you see that has happened. Rob Thompson's done with that group, since coming over. Nicholas C says Ross started this Cubs team up and was handed a very mad Cubs team and helped build them up, almost took them to the playoffs. And yeah, if you look at David Ross's resume with the Cubs, it's not going to stick out to you, but they had just won a World Series with Joe Maddon, and then were kind of resetting in a little bit of a rebuild, building up to what they are this year. And the Cubs didn't let him finish that. They kind of unceremoniously pushed him out to go get Craig Counsell. So it's not that he was doing an awful job with the Cubs. In fact, he was overperforming to some degree because they were in a rebuild. So I wouldn't take his record with the Cubs, with a huge grain of salt. Doc's Card says Clint Hurdle. I hadn't thought about that. I've liked Hurdle in the past. Obviously, managing the Pirates is a very tough job. Nicholas C says WBC is different, though. I've heard people say this different ways, that managing the WBC, it's like instant pressure. It's like a postseason atmosphere. And so managers who manage in that should get, elevated even more. I don't necessarily agree with that. I do think it helps, but I still want somebody that's done the full Major League Baseball. I mean, the grind of 162 and being able to manage a bullpen over 162 is very, very important. And a lot of people talking about D-Row. I'm just, Clinton, you're very high on DeRosa. I'm not. I just am not. And again, it's a lot to do because of my first qualification. I need somebody with experience and somebody with Major League Baseball managerial experience. And you're right, Clinton. DeRosa may be a great manager one day, but I just can't take that risk with this core right now. And some of the comments he made this year too don't really help. Jeff Fernandez says if Aaron Boone gets fired, I wouldn't mind that. I think you should definitely give a call if the Yankees were to be eliminated tonight. It wouldn't surprise me, although it looks like they just took the lead over the Red Sox here. But it wouldn't surprise me if the Yankees decided to move on from Aaron Boone, and I think he should at least get an interview. So there's a lot of good candidates out there. That's why I think it was also the right time to make this move, to move on from Brian Snitker, because I think there are some very solid candidates that will be available. All right, that will do it for this episode of Locked On Braves. Subscribe on YouTube if you're new. We're almost to 15,000 subscribers. Can we get there by tomorrow's mailbag episode? If you haven't got your question ready for that, do so. I'll send out a post from LockedOn_Braves on Friday morning. Submit your question to that post to be answered on Friday afternoon's mailbag episode. That will do it for this episode, though. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.